Okay, Peter, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here.
Well, we're wrapping up the end of the year, and I've got my Festivus tie on, so I'm excited. And this is a real pleasure because I've been following your newsletter and your methodology and your approach to selling for well over a decade. And believe it or not, some of the biggest proponent of your work is actually our CTO of Red Zone Technologies, and he's like super thrilled that we're having this conversation, and it's been a real game changer for him. And but let me just turn over to you for a moment. Even though I've done kind of the pre-intro to you, I'd love to find out how you got involved in sales, in selling, and in particular your niche. Like when was the aha moment that you realized, you know what, I have a special skill here that I can really make a difference?
So I'm not sure I have any special skills, to be perfectly honest. To answer your question, though, so trained as a chemist, worked, as we say, on the bench, which is kind of a misnomer, but for a number of years, and was convinced by my lab mates. Now, I don't know if this is good or bad, but they said, you would be really good in marketing. So I think it was meant in the best possible way. And so I joined what was called technical services. This is way back about 162 years ago, which was effectively a pre-sales position, and began doing demos and supporting customers pre and post sale, and found I really enjoyed it. I just enjoyed making that connection between the offerings, the customers, and customer success. And eventually went through a range of different positions and found myself swindled into a sales role after doing 2 years in Switzerland. I thought I was going to come back and lead marketing, and the heads of the company said, no, we think you should take a role in sales. And I said, ha, that's all very funny, but what do you really want me to do? And they said, no, we really think you should take a role in sales. And so kicking and screaming, I became your friendly neighborhood regional sales director for the U.S. West for that company. And I actually found I enjoyed it, and not so much for the traditional, I'm going to make a ton of money type of things, which may be a traditional thing, but I found that I really enjoyed finding out about customers' problems and their situation. I really enjoyed doing discovery, and because I was intimate with the offerings, and had a technical background, I was one of those comparatively rare people who, at least for a brief period of time, was considered trustworthy and credible as a salesperson. So there you go. And then I proceeded from there. I've been product marketing, I've been product, I've been head of marketing. I founded a business in 1998 as a business unit of an overarching organization and grew it up from an empty spreadsheet over a period of 5 years into a $30 million business, had about 120 reports. And then finally, when the whining got to be too great, and that was just me, I founded the business of Great Demo about 18 years ago and have not looked back.
Yeah, for everybody that
there it is.
Yeah, there it is, the Great Demo. And there was an original version in 2003, and then it was revamped in 2005, right? Or thereabouts. And
that's right.
Talk about an evergreen piece. It's you just got to love reading books that sustain through time. And what's really interesting for a lot of my listeners, so my listeners are both CTOs, CIOs, entrepreneurs, is that the role of an IT leader today. I look as two roles: offense and defense. Defense is sort of where you're protecting the kingdom, keeping the lights on, making sure users are happy. And then offense is where you're actually participating and helping put points on the board, and you're helping support sales. And even if you're not directly supporting demonstrations, you're often pulled into the mix to figure out a way. Like the sales rep would come in and say, "Listen, people are asking about the security of this organization because our SaaS product has XYZ impact on the back end, and what are you doing with the data?" And you have to pitch the capabilities. And so I'm often I'm often, even though they're not necessarily driving, as you were saying, driving the mouse of the demo. What do you see the modern IT leader supporting sales in the future?
So there's a couple of dimensions where support could be done, and we can explore these as desired. But number one is providing, I think that the thrust you were looking at, providing subject matter expertise to the sales and pre-sales team. Number two might be enabling a demo environment that really supports the needs of that same organization. And number three is then, looking forward to understand where does the organization need to go, and how do I help get the organization there, providing the tools and services, and beyond, as you phrase it so eloquently, keeping the lights on. Do you want to explore those in order?
Yes.
What's your pleasure?
I'd say
Sure.
we should look. Yeah, we should look at them in order. And I'm looking at my notes here, but I think with the subject matter expert, would that fall into sort of the pre-sale support role?
Well, it's, you're taking it, yes, it could. And you're taking the perspective of what could the IT folks do. Generally speaking, they're not actually, well, except in smaller organizations, actively involved in the sales process. But in either case, the essence here is you have somebody who has subject matter expertise in a particular space, and they've been asked to support some kind of sales or pre-sales effort. The key success factor is communication. And by communication, I mean a structured way of communicating information. So, Bill, as you've been reading in the Great Demo book, we introduce a structure called the situation slide, a way of capturing and being able to re-communicate key pieces of information you need to be able to prepare and deliver a credible and successful demo. Well, the act of capturing that information then enables the communication piece to take place. So if I was your salesperson, you're my IT head or CTO, and I've asked you to jump on a call for a demo, if I have not provided you with any information and I simply said, hey, these guys want to see a demo, what are you likely going to do? And I'm setting us up for this. You have no information. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean that's well. What am I? How am I going? Am I going to potentially freeze and feel paralyzed, or am I just going to jump on the call, or am I going to ask questions, ask for clarifying? What am I stepping into ahead of time?
I will suggest for you that most people will say, "Oh, you want me to demo this stuff? Well, sure." And they pick up this thing, they pick up their mouse, and they start clicking and talking and clicking and talking. And they do the same talk track they have always done before because that's their body of technical expertise. What we're recommending is before you move the mouse, before you get on the call with the prospect, to have the conversation within the vendor so that you, Bill, would say, so Peter, what's our objective for this demo? What do we know about this prospect? What specifically do you want me to show, and what do you not want me to show in this demo? So the situation slide information enables that to be communicated. So I'd be able to say, Bill, we're going to be talking to another chief technology officer. This is a manufacturing organization. Their objective is to really vet out our technology and make sure that it's da-da-da-da-da-da. Here are the problems that he's facing. Here's the capabilities that he's looking for. Here's the value he's looking to gain. Here's the timeline he's on. So I would communicate that information to you so that then we could agree before we get on the call with this person, what are you going to show, what are you not going to show? So does that all resonate?
Well, especially the what not to show resonates.
Yeah. I have to share this. I just got off a call this morning with a gentleman that works for an organization that produces software for one portion of the legal profession. And his typical demo meetings range 2 to 5 hours. Oof. And I had breathtaking. And I had taken a look at one of his example demos. And the question I had for him was, I said, how often do you suffer anxiety that you're going to run out of time before you've been able to show everything you want to show the prospect? And he says, all the time. I said, I think we found your problem. You've
Wow.
got to understand what are the specific capabilities this prospect needs to see versus everything that's in your offering. So that's a key factor for innovating from traditional demos.
Well, the other thing too is it enables sale. We've struggled with this. I don't think that's a surprise though with any organization. Is a sales rep, and again, and we'll come back to that. Remind me to ask you why people are having struggling calling themselves sales reps. But we can keep that separately. The confidence that a lot of sales reps have in technical realm is like stunningly low, and the self-esteem is stunningly low. However, your method actually allows someone to be a really strong consultative salesperson without actually having to lean into the thing that they feel most uncomfortable about. I just don't think that they often trust the fact that really good questions about, which will ultimately lead to people saving time and saving resources, and really differentiate yourself in the marketplace because you're not wasting other people's time. How do you build someone's confidence that this is the right path to go down?
There's a two-part question in there. The direct question you ask, how do you build confidence? I think one of the answers is something that we've practiced, which is to simply say, let's find in your organization the sales rep or sales reps who are highly respected, who seem to make their numbers quarter after quarter after quarter, and are a delight to work with. And those people tend to have true best practices. And I'm going to now go to the other half of this. So when you found those people, you can hold them up as templates of examples of how the organization could or should work. Now, most typically, one of the reasons that those people are so successful and a delight to work with is, number one, they execute the single most important part of any sales process, in which is doing sufficient discovery. And number two, once they've done that discovery, they actually communicate it to the people they're working with so that the entire team can then go forward with the customer in a much more focused way. Does that all resonate?
Yes, it does. It does. Is there a particular question that you find? So you seem to follow the Pareto principle, which is I'm sure you're familiar with, which is 20% of something gets you 80% of your results. And so, is there a particularly good set of questions or a method to asking questions that leads to the most fruitful response that you find most helpful for sales professionals to ask?
With respect to within the vendor or from the vendor to the customer, the prospect?
Prior to teeing up a full demo, are there a series of questions that you find actually are the most important to actually get in front of the demo so that the demo actually ends up being fantastic? Is there a couple questions you find most kind of provocative?
So yeah, and I just went through them sort of rapidly. So if you had called me and said, Cohan, we want you to prepare a demo for Company X, and if you had not provided me anything else, I would go through exactly the same set of questions. I would say, so Bill, what is our objective for this demo, and what is our prospect's objective for this demo? And I'm going to cycle on that just briefly, because if the prospect is in an active buying process, so they're looking for solutions, they have a pretty defined set of needs, they probably satisfy all the traditional BANT, elements, I would say, okay, before we do a demo, let's have a discovery call. Let's go through and understand where are they, what are they looking for, where are the pain points, where are the value elements, what's the time considerations, what's the impact. In other words, let's do discovery, and then based on that, we can present the capabilities that are needed. Now, that's the active buying process. Interestingly, a large number of people that request a demo, that mash that book a demo button on vendor websites, are actually only interested in getting a sense of what is possible. And for those people, we need to contemplate what is known as a vision generation demo. Just enough, are you ready? I hope everybody in the audience is sitting down. if you all are familiar with the classic 1-hour overview demo, throw that out. That is not vision generation. That is pain for the prospect. A vision generation demo could be as crisp as 6 minutes. As in, Bill, let me share with you how we've helped other folks that might be in very similar situations to you. They shared they were trying to achieve these objectives. They were suffering from these problems. They were looking for these capabilities, and they were hoping for this kind of gain or change. Well, we provided those capabilities, and what the report is they've been able to secure those kinds of gains or changes. Would you like an example or two of screens from our software that showed what they were using, what they were communicating, or what they were consuming, rather, to achieve those kinds of objectives? And Bill, you say?
I say yes. I like
absolutely.
To do that. Yes.
I share 1 or 2 or 3 reports, dashboards, key screens, do a quick summary. That is just enough to provide the person who is not yet in an active buying process, who is just browsing, if you will, with the art of the possible to see, what's possible out there. I certainly do not need to know how to set up the system. I certainly do not need to know all the ifs, the ors, and alsos that would typically be revealed in a 1-hour overview demo. I just want to get a high-level understanding, a true high-level understanding, and here's the kicker, based on my job title. So if I'm an executive, I want to see the kinds of reports that enable me to manage my business, track my progress, and understand where there are problems and opportunities and exceptions to explore. If I'm a middle manager, I have a different perspective. I have a similar perspective. I need to manage my business, but it's not that business, it's this piece of the business. If I'm a staff member, I'm interested in executing the workflows that I have to do in the simplest, fastest, easiest way. And if I'm at a system administrator type, well, those are the people that are interested in how to set up and run the system. But those are 4 discrete personalities or personas that can be mapped down more deliberately to specific job titles. So if I was preparing for a demo for you, Bill, then I would be asking, what's our objective? Who's going to be in the room or the virtual room? What are their job titles? What do we know about them? And if we don't have sufficient information, I would push back on you gently but firmly. And if this was a prospect that was in an active buying process, I would say, let's have a discovery call so that we can actually show them what they need.
That's great. That's great. And you and I would say that what's really interesting you mentioned is this vision generation, because that is what a great and the art of the possible. Because I often find a large chunk of the conversations are just that. They're what's possible here, and not so much feature functionality benefits, but what is possible. And that is very, very powerful.
This is a fascinating arena, and it's a huge opportunity that is largely being missed by the software industry. I've been talking for a number of years about vision generation demos, and people are just beginning to get it, if you will.
Yeah.
There's a tendency for people to do so. I harvested a term from a workshop that I did in Germany 100 years ago from a woman who, when I was describing show up and throw up, spray and pray, the IKEA demo, etc., she said, "Oh, you mean the harbor tour?" And I'd never heard that term before, and asked her to find what she meant. She says, you put the prospect on a boat, they can't get off.
Right.
And you would drive them around the harbor for 3 hours, constantly asking them, "So, have you seen anything you like so far?" That's a harbor tour demo. That's the traditional overview demo. And I use the term derogatively when I say harbor tour demo. Interestingly, from time to time, I hear people actually pick it up and use it as if it's a positive, like, "Hey, we're going to show you a harbor tour." No, it's the opposite of that. So the idea of the vision generation is to solve that problem. So instead of inflicting a 1-hour harbor tour on somebody, to get it done in, let's say, 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 minutes,
And if you're thinking about people that are going through this, the phrase of digital transformation, meaning we're going from some form of paper or Excel or something to something that's fully digital, and they're just at the beginnings of their journey, they really just want to know what's possible. What kinds of things can I get out of this? What should I be thinking about as I begin this journey? So that's what vision generation is all about.
Yeah, I love that. And in fact, I think the reason why my CTO and I love it is because we actually lead with pictures, because there's just so much damn complexity that you can just bury people in complexity. So it's like one of the biggest roles right now seems to be, to me, to be able to paint pictures of what is possible. And we actually do that visually, because I don't think there is the mind can just take in tremendous, from a neuroscience perspective, it can take in the bandwidth of our eyes is staggering. And from a lot of the work people have been talking about recently, Hans Nordtrander, it's called Information is Beautiful, I think it's called. But you put everything into literally one document where you can talk about the vision of, and then ask lots of really good questions during that little 6 minute, 10 minutes. So I'm a huge proponent of that. Before we get into talking about any demos, go ahead.
Well, this is perfect. I mean, I love to say this. So one picture is worth
1,000 words.
Which means that in a demo, one good, compelling screenshot, a report, or dashboard should be worth what? And the answer is 1,000 mouse clicks.
Oh, that could be the title of this whole episode. Yeah,
there you go.
One screenshot's worth 1,000 mouse clicks. But I think it's that in digital transformation, digital upgrades. Sometimes I think people call them transformation when they're really just upgrading to the cloud. But whatever we call it, it's almost like sometimes people listening could take it and also use it to their advantage if they're actually on the receiving end of a demo. How do you get out ahead of it so you don't get pulled into a harbor tour? And you'd almost could structure it in reverse and say this is our criteria. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for what is possible, because sometimes I don't think people know what to ask for.
And they don't. How can the prospect know? They are not experts in the space, typically speaking. And so they're coming to you, the vendor, basically saying, I don't know what's possible. We teach another idea, and I'm going to introduce it in a backwards way. So you are hungry. You're walking down, maybe this is 2 years ago or a year from now, you're walking down the main street in your town, and you're exploring restaurants you've never been to before. And you see one that looks interesting, and you walk in, and I'm your waiter, and I seat you, and I say to you, Bill, what would you like?
Coffee.
Coffee. Sorry, fresh out. We don't have any coffee here. So what would you like? And we're already at an impasse, right? You don't know what we offer, and I don't know what you want. And so the solution to that problem in a restaurant is a device known as what?
A menu.
A menu. And a menu enables us to do two things as a prospect. It enables us to see, number one, what's possible, and from that list of what's possible, then to choose what's most interesting to us. Well, we teach that same idea for demos. So if you have an offering that has, several different modules or a range of different topic areas that it embraces or enables, you can contemplate starting a demo off, particularly a vision generation demo, with a menu. You say, so dear Bill, here's a range of 5 different areas where we've helped other organizations. Which of these look most interesting to you? And boom, what's happened? 2 things have happened. Number one, you're engaged, because now you're beginning to make decisions about where you want to take this demo. And number 2, we're actually going down a pathway that's going to be mutually productive.
And you're determining what not to show.
And you're determining what not to show, exactly. Yeah, number 1 and number 2 on that list, that's really important. We don't care about number 5. Perfect.
Yeah.
And unlike a Harvard tour, then we're not going to talk about number 5.
What do you find? Well, one of the things that's been most impactful from reading your material is starting with last things first, and how, and that has really forced a lot of introspection from how we present material, but then certainly in the COVID arena, because we're really not sure we can't really read attention and can't really read body language as much in COVID. So sometimes you can see the audience flagging and you can be like, you know what, let me just fast forward here. Well, if you can't really determine that quite as well in COVID. So I'm curious about, maybe you can explain this last first principle and then maybe how you've morphed and adjusted during kind of COVID timeframe.
So I'm going to answer the second question first. So with COVID, to a certain degree, it hasn't changed the principles at all.
Okay.
It's simply a matter of the vehicle. So, previously a lot of our demos would be face-to-face, but what you present in the demo is still the same, assuming you're following some of these ideas. So let's choose potentially 2 analogies here. Do you remember, and I assume these are still made, remember plastic kits of models of boats and cars and airplanes?
Oh, sure. The ones you used to glue together,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so if you open up the box, what's inside?
A bunch of parts.
Tons of parts and detailed instructions. There's glue. If it was like a balsa wood model airplane, for example, there'd be glue, there'd be paper, there'd be wires, wheels, and traditional demos basically start with all those parts, and they say, okay, let's show you now. We're going to put this together. We're going to put this together. Okay, we're going to start putting these ribs down. You're going to glue this way. And by the way, if you glue it this way, it's not going to work. And da 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 da. And finally, if you haven't run out of time, you finally have completed building this model. So now here's the question: how do you choose which model kit box you're most interested in? What do you look at when it's on the shelf?
Well, you look at on the shelf, you look at the beautiful picture of the end product, and it's determine, the battleship or whatever, you're going to be putting together.
And they're action pictures. It's not like, oh, here's a boring boat.
Yeah,
it's
right.
That battleship driving through the heaving seas, or an airplane diving out of the sky, or a car speeding around a turn. That's the end result that our prospect is looking for.
Interesting. And so, that's really important.
By showing them the end result, that hooks them, gets them interested, and then they're willing, or more willing, to go through the key elements of the process to get to that end result. With a caveat, and that is, we talked about this briefly, the higher you go in an organization, the less they care about the process and more just the end result.
So in theory, if someone was just looking for management reports, then, so the higher up the food chain, they're looking for, I would imagine, actionable.
Let's take a tangible, real example. CRM systems, okay?
Okay, yep.
Head of sales. What does the head of sales want out of a CRM system? And I'm going to suggest it's 2 or 3 items. What does the head of sales want out of a CRM system?
I would say really two things. One is the funnel, that the trees that are about to go into the factory for making the chairs, and then do we have the factory capacity, and then what's coming out? What are the sold chairs that have been sold?
Yeah, good analogy. So it's basically, what's our forecast, which is this quarter's chairs.
Yeah, right.
What's our pipeline going out? 9 months whatsoever. And in my mind, I might want a third thing, which is give me insight into each of my reps so that I can understand, where's their loading, where's their processes, where do I need to coach or help them or remove obstacles. Now, think about CRM system demos. And they tend, if you've ever suffered through some of these, and this is actually what caused the methodology to be invented, I can tell you that story. They start with a phrase like, well, let me show you how to enter a new record. and then we'll duplicate that and enter another record. Let's run a marketing campaign. Let's now take those and progress those, and after 2 hours, we've got tons of terrific reports. Trust me. So if you're presenting to a head of sales and you run a demo that's showing all the individual bits and pieces of the process that the marketing folks and the salesperson might go through to progress and manage their leads and their opportunities, you're not seeing what you want as the head of sales. You want those reports, those dashboards, because that's how you manage your business. That's how you look to see, are you tracking for success? Are there opportunities that you're missing? Are there exceptions that should be explored? Does that all resonate?
Oh, yeah. So you're
turn the demo upside down. Do that last thing first.
So you last thing first in the meeting, and so we found that amazingly helpful. What is generally the reaction when you first say that to sales professionals or to their bosses?
It really depends on where they are. For salespeople that are seasoned veterans and have been making their numbers consistently, they don't want to change.
Sure.
Let me rephrase. A rare percentage who are constantly interested in improving their game will embrace these ideas and explore them and test them out. Salespeople are amongst the single most conservative entities on the face of the earth, because they're like baseball players. If something is working, they don't want to change. So generally speaking, it's an organization that has a head of sales or a head of pre-sales that says, either, and I've actually had conversations begin with this phrase, it says, our demos suck. Believe it or not, that has happened not once, but multiple times. Or equally, if not more likely, a head of sales or a head of pre-sales or CRO will say, our demos are okay, but we really need to do better. We need to differentiate. We need to. And that's where a good conversation really then begins. But those are the starting points. Does that help?
Sure. So you're not as much going to spend time with the top 10% or the top 20% of sales reps that may have some more friction process. You're actually trying to coach up the folks that are and really groom that next 30% or that next 40%.
Wow, this is a cultural challenge. It really depends on the nature of the organization and the individuals. But I'll make the following, and it goes back to what I just said. I'll make the following observations. If you have a successful salesperson who is also interested in continually improving his or her process, they're the best. Because they're those leader positions that you can hold up again as representatives to the rest of the organization.
Sure.
One of the biggest challenges in any methodology training, whether it's sales or demo or anything else, is addressing what are sadly often referred to as the B players, because that's where you feel you've got the most leverage. But if you have A players that are not following these methodology steps, why are the B players going to consider doing that? They're going to say, well, Janet doesn't do this, and she always makes her numbers, so why should I make these kinds of changes? One of the things that we often recommend in training, when people say, well, let's train a portion of the team, I will almost always say, terrific, let's choose some of your best performers. And as a reward for that performance, let's give them an improved set of skills. Let's sharpen their saws. Let's get them a power saw.
Right.
And then as they launch forward, when they subscribe to the ideas and they say, oh, this is terrific, this makes perfect sense. I actually had a gentleman, this is way back, if I recall correctly, in 2004, I was doing a workshop, and a gentleman in the front left of the room at one of these round tables, about 2 hours of the workshop, he leaps up out of his chair, he smacks his forehead, and he yells, "Epiphany!" Now, he was one of the top performers on the team, but what had happened is he'd suddenly realized, oh, I could do this so much better. And he began to change his practices, and the end result was he accelerated, and he pulled the rest of the team behind him because they respected him. They figured that if he's having success with these kinds of things, then we should probably pursue that as well. So the strategy of saying, oh, let's take a look at the B players and put them all through training may not be the best strategy. Does that resonate?
I agree with that, because this is really this is where you're taking your craft to the next level. It's unfortunately it's one of the professions where it's I call it's the world's worst paying easy job and the world's best paying hard job. And part of it being even with neurosurgeons, there's the top of the class and the bottom of the class. You're just never really sure who's cutting into you. Is it someone at the bottom of the class or the top? But we just assume they're all, because they're neurosurgeons, we assume they're all great. Well, within the sales profession, the same thing exists, in my opinion, is that you got 100 folks, there's going to be, your 10 or your 20 that outperform the rest. But why? You go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And so I always really want to know why, because I feel like that you're constantly looking to improve your game and improve your effectiveness. And as things get more complex, how can you improve your effectiveness in front of others so that not only so they win, but we all win, and certainly the sales rep makes more money for sure. But usually in those cases, everyone's winning, and to me, that's a big mission.
You mentioned Pareto curves, and here's one of the biggest problems for all of us. And it was embodied in a conversation I was having with a head of sales a number of years ago, where I was in a discovery call with him, and we were talking about the team's discovery skills. And I said, well, what portion of the team would you say does a good job with discovery? And he says, about maybe 10 to 20%. And I thought for a moment, because of something he'd said earlier, and I said, let me ask this again slightly differently. I said, what portion of your team thinks they do a good job in discovery, but they really don't? And he says, hang on, let me close my door. And I hear this ka-chunk, and he comes back to me, and obviously didn't want to share this with whoever was listening in. But he says, yeah, you know what? It's easily 80% of the team that really think they're doing a good job with discovery, and they think they're doing a good job with demos, but they really aren't. And that, he said, is really the core of the problem. The people that don't know what they don't know. That's you know the 4 stages?
I may, but why don't you go through them? Because
sure.
I don't want to make sure I would miss them.
So stage 1 is unconsciously incompetent, meaning you don't know what you don't know. So how can you get better, right?
Right.
By the way, that's the 80%. There's the root of the problem. Stage 2 is consciously incompetent, meaning, okay, I've had some training and awareness, and now I realize I'm not doing these things well or as well as I could, okay? Or I'm not doing certain things at all. Stage 3 is consciously competent, which means now I'm doing the right things, but I have to think about them. And then stage 4, of course, is unconsciously competent, meaning I don't even have to think about it. I just do the right things. And by the way, a lot of quote-unquote natural salespeople or pre-sales people tend to be successful, natural sales, pre-sales people, tend to fall into that 4th category. And if you ask them, what are you doing and why, they'd say, I can't really tell you. I just do it. So methodology is a cohesive set of skills that, when combined, reinforce, support one another, and integrate, if you will. People who are the naturally unconsciously competent tend to be doing that integration without ever thinking about it. And breaking that down into something like a great demo methodology or a sales methodology, and then being able to reassemble that through training and skills development, is really what we're trying to do with the 80% of the team that isn't there yet.
Well, it's really interesting that my CTO loves it so much. And I think that's because I stopped. I put a foot down and said, no, I'm no longer going to use my CTO, because I thought I was getting lazy. And, you can get lazy. A sales rep can get lazy by using the technical resources because you think everything is a technical conversation, but it's not. And so it was. This is now many years ago. but forced myself to build skills up around discovery so that when I actually pulled some of the guns in to support my sales efforts, I had already had this kind of huge trust built up through this process, and now I could let those people shine in a successful way. But what do you think about that from my blatant statement there about getting lazy by just leaning into engineering support?
I cannot tell you how many times I've heard a sales rep say, and here's John, Barbara, whoever, who's going to show you a demo. And that's the entire conversation that had been had with the prospect. No discovery, no objectives, no nothing. Hey, does this time still work? Great. Here's George.
Yeah.
So what you're articulating is you're not alone. But here's a scary metric, two scary metrics. Number one, about 30% of all demos that are delivered traditionally are considered to be a waste. 30%. So they're harbor tours, they're overviews for people that never were going to go anywhere. They were just browsing, they weren't good prospects, or it was a bad fit in one case or another, or they're no decision outcomes or at risk of no decisions. And in the software industry, if I recall correctly, it's something like 45% of all opportunities that are placed on the forecast end up as a no decision, meaning prospect doesn't choose you, they don't choose a competitor, they just say, no, you know, we're going to stay with status quo, we're not changing. So, you know, doing discovery to enable a successful demo to take place is really what this is all about.
So is it as we come to a close here, Peter, would you say that your current thinking is around that your best practices of thinking are discovery matched with this, what is possible vision generation, and learning how to integrate this into your discovery process?
I'd say yes. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I know these are distinct the way you've explained them, so I don't want to mash them together if there really are two distinct phases, which I know they are, but are you saying there's kind of mastery of these two phases is the most critical part right now? Most fruitful?
I would say that we define two different types of demos: vision generation and technical proof. Vision generation is done to enable a discovery conversation to take place. Technical proof is done using the information from that discovery conversation to basically prove out the capabilities that the prospect is looking for. And that would be a way to look at that process. Gotcha.
Well, listen, I want to give you just a ton of accolades for how valuable you've been to myself and my team, and our listeners. I think are going to get a tremendous amount of mileage from this. Where can people go to learn more about you, your team, and some of the ways that they can engage with you and your team moving forward?
The easiest place to go is on the web, greatdemo.com. Greatdemo.com. And there's a resources page I would invite you, or a series of pages I would invite you to look at that has a series of articles which you're more than welcome to browse, including articles on the menu approach and vision generation demos. We have a blog there. There's a number of other resources as well. That's the easiest place to go.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'll make sure on the show notes that we put that in and include that. Is there anything as we wrap up that you want to summarize with that you were hoping I'd ask that you're like, and I didn't?
I would, yeah, actually. I used to encounter this a lot in great demo workshops, and I could tell very, very early in a workshop if I needed to offer this little idea, and that is, it goes like this. In the world of demos or discovery, I ask, what's an expert? And people would say, well, they know everything, or they're da-da-da-da-da, all different kinds of answers. And then I would say, okay, in the world of demos and discovery, an apprentice is somebody who's just learning the customers, they're learning the software, and they're learning how to work between those two things. A journeyman is somebody who knows the software, understands the customers, and a range of scenarios and can navigate those different kinds of scenarios and do it successfully. Which begs the question as to what's an expert. And in my definition, an expert is that person who in the middle of a demo is thinking, oh, you know what? I bet I could be doing this part differently or better. In other words, an expert is somebody who's constantly seeking to improve his or her practice. And that, I think, is the message I'd like to leave with the audience, that ask yourself the question, are you a journeyman or are you really an expert?
Journeyman or an expert. I love that. I can see that us weaving that into the major part of the post, or maybe one of the images we put on the call to action. That's great. That's great. Is there any ways any people can use better proposal generation tools? Is there any proposal generation tools, or not proposal generation tools, but way to make the PowerPoints? Have you found any particular tools that help with facilitating better looking PowerPoint presentations?
Less is more.
Less is more. Okay. .com. Lessismore.com.
Lessismore.com. I should say. I'm sure it's not available. Yeah, I mean, traditionally people try to pack as much as they can on each slide and have as many slides as they feel they need. Take any corporate overview presentation, any traditional corporate overview presentation. Most of them will run between, what's your guess? How many slides?
Overview, I would say
corporate overview.
To 12-page overview.
It could be 12. Yeah, I think 12's pretty typical, and
Okay.
They can go much longer than that. And interestingly, for the prospect, there is actually only one portion of that presentation which is really interesting for them, and it's the portion that is often either never presented or is given the shortest amount of time, and these are the use cases or customer success stories that typically come at the very end of those corporate overview presentations. All the rest of it, as the Europeans would say, is blah, blah, blah.
Harbor tour, blah, blah, blah. Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate this very much. And I'm sure everybody's going to get a tremendous amount from this. So appreciate you for your time today.
Pleasure is truly mine.